Uh, okay, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, good afternoon, good morning, or whatever time is appropriate. My name is Dr. Morton. I'm one of the associate ministers at the Cathedral International in Perth Amboy, New Jersey. I am an educator for the past 33 years. I teach in the city of Newark at Barringer High School. I'm a health and physical education and driver's ed instructor, and I've been in the ministry for 31 years, and I've been teaching for 33.
Okay. Um, where where did you live during the Newark riots?
I lived in the town of Mount Clair, New Jersey, which is about 5-minute, 10-minute drive down Bloomfield Avenue to get into Newark. And so when I was a youngster, I was in my adolescent years. I was about between the ages of 10 and 12 when the Newark riots took place.
For those of us who don't know our history that well, could you tell us what the Newark riots were?
Well, at that particular time, to my recollection, it was the advancing of a people for civil rights, having the quality to education, to be able to buy affordable homes, and to have all of the other rights and privileges that our Constitution guaranteed us as citizens in the United States.
By any chance, do you know what caused these riots?
Well, the despair among people who were of low economic means. Um, the sweltering heat of the summers of 64, 5, and 66, and 67, and 68 were a turbulent time when America was exhaling in relationship to the plight of African Americans, back then called Negroes, their rights in our society as full human beings in regards to education, jobs, and buying decent homes.
Oh, where were you when these riots occurred?
Well, I was in my neighborhood, and we used to watch on the evening news on television, and then we used to run outside and run up the street to Bloomfield Avenue, where the polywagons used to take those who had been arrested from the Newark riots up to the Essex County Prison.
Were you ever fearful for your life when these riots were happening?
No, I never really felt afraid because I pretty much embraced the cry of our people during those struggles, but yet I was protected by my neighborhood and my community, and additionally by my family, so I never was afraid.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Okay, you're welcome.
My name is Mark Riley.
And tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Riley.
Well, I'm a teacher at St. Benedict's Prep in Newark, New Jersey, and I am married and the father of 2.
Now, where did you live during the Newark riots?
During the Newark riots, I lived in the South Ward, which was the Clinton Hill section of Newark.
For those of us who might not know our history that well, what were the Newark riots?
Well, the Newark riots was a few days in the summer of 1967 in which people sometimes refer to as an insurrection, rebellion, revolution. A very hot summer.
Can you tell us about your personal experiences during that riot?
Well, I was pretty young, but still I have very vivid memories of state troopers, National Guard, the Army driving trucks and tanks down my street. There were curfews And the neighborhood in which I lived in was very much literally, let's say, shut off from everything else. It was a almost a well, it was a police state. It was martial law almost, meaning that the military came in place of the police and was doing the policing of different neighborhoods, especially in the central and south wards where I grew up.
What, to your knowledge, what caused the Newark riots?
To my knowledge, it was pretty much I guess a reaction to what had been happening in Newark for probably several decades in terms of inadequate housing, declining education, lack of jobs and opportunities for poorer people, and the treatment of African Americans by police.
Can you recall where you were when the riots occurred?
Well, I was probably at home. It was after school, and I can recall my father coming home from work, basically saying to us, my sister, myself, my mom, that we should definitely, try to stay inside because said police are pretty much everywhere. People are, really starting to, get riled up as far as breaking store windows, and there was a lot of probably like looting starting to happen in the different shopping corridors along the main avenues in Newark, namely where I lived, Bergen Street, Clinton Avenue. Those were like some of the main shopping thoroughfares in the South Ward at that time.
So you were pretty much right in the center of all this action.
I was in the center of, I guess, mainly in the South Ward, but it was also in the Central Ward, essentially wherever African Americans lived. That's where, let's say, quote unquote, the riots took place. It didn't, basically didn't go downtown Newark. It pretty much stopped at High Street, which is now King Boulevard, right where the courthouse is.
And were you ever fearful for your life or the life of your family?
At times, yes. At times. My dad, in terms of going out every day, would like hug us and kiss us and, tell us that he loved us very much because it was not really a guarantee that he was even going to come back, given what we were hearing on, let's say, on the newspaper, and also hearing, from different neighbors about people getting shot by police and or the National Guard.
What was your most vivid memory of the Newark riots?
My most vivid memory was probably a night that my dad had us with him. He had picked us up from school, my sister and myself. We had a brand new 1967 Buick Deuce and a Quarter, Electra 225. And we had to go shopping. Well, any of the stores in Newark were let's say, not functioning, basically. Uh, and there were roadblocks everywhere, checkpoints. So, as I said before, martial law had taken hold in Newark, especially in the South and Central wards. So, my father, who, as I said, had my sister and myself, had to go shopping, food shopping, not just for our own family, but he went shopping for pretty much everybody in the neighborhood because he was able to get out. Because he had a brand new car. He would basically indicate that he was a chauffeur to the military, to the police, and that he had to, drive, I guess, his suburban employer to work. So my sister, who is actually very, very fair-skinned and actually sometimes could pass for Caucasian, so he had us in the car with him and said, well, I got to get these kids, to the suburbs. So the military, the police, let them go without any, real question. And we would go shopping. We wound up going shopping in like Westfield, Clark, to supermarkets, and would come back with, let's say, trunk carload of food for pretty much everybody in the neighborhood. And that's probably my most vivid memory of the riots, because I remember saying to my dad, boy, I don't know how about, this riot stuff, but I'm sure glad I got some peanut butter and jelly. And so that's really, and we still laugh at that today. So the riots, my most fond memory or vivid memory is having peanut butter and jelly.
So despite the chaos going on around you, you still had one vivid memory of hope.
Yep, that I was going to be able to have lunch the next day of my peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Riley, and sharing with us your recollections of this event.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am Deacon Bernard Crawford. I am president of the Baptist Ushers Union of Newark and vicinity. I am president of my usher board. I am president of my bowling league. I was born 1950, September 28th, and I was raised up in the city of Newark. And at the time of the riot, I was living on Howard Street in Newark.
For those of us who might not know our history so well, could you tell us what the Newark riots were?
The Newark riots were, how would you say it? It was something that started out of prejudice because of the Newark Police Department. And at the time of the riots, tension was high in the city already. And it got started because rumors spread it around the city that the police department, white police officers, attacked and beat a black cab driver. And that really kicked off the tensions. And then the word spread that the cab driver had died, which he didn't. And then all hell broke loose throughout the West Ward, the South Ward, and part of the North Ward. It didn't spread throughout the entire North Ward because of a councilman called Anthony Imperiali, who got the Italians together and said that he had a tank, and if anybody came over there, he was going to use it. Okay, and it didn't spread down into the East Ward because basically the East Ward consisted of mostly white people. And the police did barricade part of that off because you had to go under a bridge to get to that, which is called the Neck of Newark.
Now, where were you when the riots happened?
Oh, boy, almost like yesterday. I was out in my neighborhood. I lived in the projects, and then I went home and I asked my father. I was 16 at the time. I said, "Can I go? Can I go?" And first he told me no because I wanted to go out and participate. Then he told me to go in the kitchen, sit down, and eat. And I was anxious to get into the streets. So I went into the kitchen and I sat down and I ate. After I ate dinner, then he told me, "Okay, you can go out." After I went out and I was with crowds. They were tearing the steel barricades or metal barricades off stores. There was looting going on. They were burning buildings. People were being chased by the police. They were throwing rocks and bottles at the police.
Were you ever fearful for your life or the life of your family?
At that time, I was the type of person who walked with no fear. I felt like I really couldn't be hurt. I had no fear. People who knew me knew the type of person I was. I lived in a tough neighborhood, and I had some very tough friends, and the friends that I was with, you had to be tough. So we didn't have any fear of anything. I didn't even have any fear of the police.
So you pretty much thought you were the top cat?
No, it was not point of thinking you were the top cat. It was the point of, I lived in a neighborhood that if you showed fear, you could be jumped, beaten by not only people in your neighborhood, but in other neighborhoods. And you had to go to school, and you had to walk the streets. And when you lived on Howard Street, which had a reputation for being tough, then you had to meet those standards because you were hanging out with one of the toughest gangs in the city of Newark.
So it was a pretty rough joint.
Oh yes, oh yes.
Now, can you recall what was one of your most vivid memories of the Newark riots?
Wow. You know, the people, there was a few. The people who were killed. There was a woman who had about 7 or 8 children, and she lived, I believe it was on the 8th or the 9th floor in the projects over on Prince Street, was it? Montgomery Street. Prince Street. And the police officer shot up at her window and shot her in the head.
Ooh.
Killed her. And there were other people that were killed. That's one of the most. The other was I got caught looting. I got caught looting. I had been out all night. I had looted quite a few things, and I got greedy. I went out. I saw a suit that I wanted, and I was in the store. And when someone hollered the cops were coming, some of us ran back in the store to hide. And I jumped over the counter, laid down on the floor, and threw a bunch of clothes on myself. Another guy followed me. And when he did that, I said, "Just be quiet." The cops came into the store. They looked over the counter. They never saw us. Then the guy the guy that followed me started crying. He was a teenager. He started crying, and I was telling him, shh, be quiet, be quiet. And he kept crying. He was scared. And then the police heard me telling this guy to be quiet, and they jumped on top of the counter, and they were like, aha, got you.
Oops.
Yeah, so then they arrested us. Then there was a friend of mine named Fred. He was one of the tops in martial arts.
Mm.
A cop hit him, and that was a big mistake. Fred had about 10 cops on him that he was beating the heck out of, and Fred was only about 16, 17 years old. And even in the neighborhood, guys that got mad with him, they would throw bottles at him because you couldn't touch him with his hands and feet. So what the cops did, the way they got him, they threw their chains on him. They threw chains on him that they would use to with multiple handcuffs. They threw chains on him, and they brought him down. And then they threw him, myself, and a guy that worked for the post office. They threw us in the car and took us downtown. And I was put in the youth house, and my father signed me out the next day.
Aish. Talk about a lot of stuff happening in one night.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, since we lived on the 13th floor, you could see the fires all over the Central Ward. Places that were burning, stores, businesses, houses. And there was a lot of alcohol stolen, and a lot of bottles broken. And the air throughout the whole neighborhood smelled of alcohol. Because living up on the 3rd floor, the scent carries up. And things just continued on. Getting back to the mayor, he panicked. He panicked, and the black city council people and others told him to calm down, that things could quiet down. But he panicked, and he said that he was going to bring in the National Guard.
Oh.
So what happened, what could have ended in one night, by him calling up the National Guard, it extended it. Because the National Guard had to get themselves together and then come into Newark. Meanwhile, the riots just kept spreading into the next day, and then before you know it, the National Guard was all over the West Ward, which is the Central Ward where I lived, the South Ward, and they didn't. And then they blocked off the East Ward and the North Ward to keep it from spreading. And then they started to, after a couple of days, things started to level off, but all the damage was done.
Ugh. Pretty much, like, throughout that whole, because he called in the National Guard, pretty much turned Newark into a war zone.
Definitely. Oh, yes it did, yeah. People were angry. Black people were angry. The generation that I was in was angry, and it was a generation that was saying, we're not going to take it anymore. It was a rebellious generation. The way we were raised up from the old school and the old laws, our generation had gotten to a point we weren't just going to take it anymore. What our parents went through, we were not going to go through it.
You decided to take a stand?
Oh, yeah, everybody took a stand, yeah. Because of what happened in Newark with that riot and what precipitated it, that changed a lot of things in Newark. I mean, there was a big loss because of all the stores that used to be on Prince Street. You had all kinds of clothing stores, food stores, vegetable stores. All of that was gone. and it never returned, not even to this day. All those stores were gone. Parts of Prince Street now, they have new houses, and there's nothing over in one section of it. It was a big loss, it was a gain, but you know, one of the things that was a big mistake was when they built the projects in Newark. Housing people, especially black people, on top of black people. That causes a lot of tension. You just don't do that, and you're treating them wrong. And you'll have a lot of those people that they were on welfare, they were broke, they were winos, they were junkies. But the thing is that the street that I lived on, even though there were drugs in the neighborhood, our neighborhood was one of the cleanest. And the reason for that was we knew the people who were doing the cleaning of the halls, and in the summertime, our generation went and got jobs with the Newark Housing Authority, and they cleaned the halls. I live at my age group, we protected our neighborhood. So it was clean. Howard Street was destroyed by the next couple of generations that came along. And then they were all being destroyed until finally they decided it was time to tear it down. And if you go up there and look now, it's a big difference. One of the big pluses that they did do there was when they built the pool. That was a big plus. I watched that pool when they put the foundation into the ground. I watched them. There was a church there. They tore down that area at that church. Anything else was in that block. That church is now around the corner. They built a whole new building before they moved. And then they built the pool there. The pool is there, and it has not been destroyed. And the whole area is beautiful around there. But the worst thing that they did was housing, building the projects. And then when the drugs hit. But the police at the time created a lot of tensions. They would just drag people off the street, take them and charge them. So there was plenty of tensions. With the beating of the police officer, it just brought all the tension out. You're not going to take this no more. No, you're not going to do this and get away with it. And somewhere somebody put out a lie that the guy, after he was beaten, that he died. And then everybody just went wild.
Thanks for your story.
Mm-hmm.